gaining access to the Filmation animated characters from the Masters of the Universe property was a huge deal for the Matty Collector MOTUC Classics line. It was also a lot of work because we didn't anticipate getting them, and, well, no bios were written for them, and we didn't exactly have them in the original rollout. The rollout was focused on characters we did have access to, such as characters who had appeared in the vintage toy line or from the 2000X series. When all of that changed, when Classic Media and Mattel came to an agreement to allow Mattel to license the Filmation characters, and we'd already been paying Classic Media royalty for every character from MOTU, since at the time they were the owners. Universal's now the owners because of acquisitions, but regardless, it just exploded the number of characters we had access to. We suddenly went to having, maybe 200 to now having 500. I mean, I haven't exactly done a count, but how do you tackle that? How do you go after which characters when you have so many now to choose from that weren't part of the rollout? Well, the easy way to do this was to ask a fan, and when that fan decided to post my request list on his blog instead of helping, we turned to the internet, and we turned to fan art. See, fan art and fan customs tend to be a very good indicator of which characters people want to see as action figures. So, yeah, if you're seeing customs of this figure out there, it's a pretty good indication that there's demand for this character. We also, of course, looked a lot at the actual episodes and tried to zero in on characters that sort of own an episode, if you will. And, well, of all of the Filmation-specific characters, Shakoti here was one of the characters that truly owned her own episodes. She had a two-parter called The House of Shakoti. And while she never appeared in the vintage line, she became very popular. Well, because this episode is kind of dark. It's probably the closest thing to a horror episode that Filmation had. I mean, obviously it was a kids show, but yeah, Shakoti was kind of like a demonic witch, but she fit very well into classics. Her colors, her build, her articulation, her armor, her helmet, all very MOTU, and she worked. So, who is Shakoti, and why are we doing a character of her? Why is she so popular? Well, as I said, there was a two-parter, one of the only two-parters in the original 130 episodes, and despite Ram Man's inability to pronounce her name throughout the episode, it's one of the most fondly remembered, simply because, well, it was so different from a lot of other episodes that Filmation put out. It was dark. It was really considered the horror episode or double episode of the series, where He-Man and Ram-Man find Shakoti's temple, and there's a whole adventure. She first projects her essence, and then actually shows up, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and there's kids being attacked, not only attacked, but attacked by, little tiny monsters with tentacles, and, having monsters with tentacles wrapped around you is kind of freaky for kids. So, yeah, this episode definitely stuck around in a lot of people's collective unconsciousness because, well, it definitely was different in terms of Filmation episodes, and it made Shakoti as the lead villain extremely popular. So, having her in the Classics line was definitely high on my priority list once we had these Filmation rights. Now, doing Shakoti, there's actually kind of like a natural pairing because she has a flunky in the form of Lord Masque. So it was one of those things where you can't really do Shakoti without also doing Lord Masque, but we also didn't want to release them both at the same time to blow through our Filmation characters too quickly. So while Shakoti never had a figure in the vintage line, she probably could have, because, again, being a main villain in Filmation, not only in a two-parter, but, without Skeletor, is kind of a big deal. She wasn't in the 2000X Mike Young series, but that didn't stop fans from reimagining what she could have looked like under the Horseman sort of reimagining. The Classics figure, though, was going to stick to what she would have looked like had she been a toy in the vintage line. That was how we tended to approach these figures, and we approached all the females in the vein of Teela and Eva Lynn, as opposed to She-Ra and her other figures that were really dolls in the girls' line. So Shakoti was going to be done as an action figure, meaning no rooted hair. Now, she has a lot of connections to MOTU lore. For example, like Cyclone, she has the blue skin, which makes her a Gar, similar to Keldor and other, very important characters to the MOTU brand. So that was the source of a lot of her power, since the Gar are sort of natural magicians, etc. And you can really see a lot of influence of Jack Kirby on her design. Now, while she was created by the Filmation studio, she definitely retained that sort of look that crossed over. So much Motu was influenced by Jack Kirby's New Gods and Third World comic. In fact, the reason is because it was extensively worked on prior to Motu in '82. And when this line was dropped in favor of doing Motu, the designs that were being worked on for a Fourth World toy line tended to hodgepodge their way into Masters of the Universe, shall we say. It's why so many of the vehicles and so much of the armor looks very Kirby, especially the early stuff. And Shakoti was great because with her headset, her mask, her headpiece, it had that very sort of big Barda, New Gods kind of motif going, and it because of that design motif and so much of Motu, having her incorporate that as well really helped solidify her as a Motu villain. You can kind of look at her and say, oh yeah, that's a Motu character. Oh yeah, not to mention she had like one of the coolest accessories of the entire line, the darkling. Yep, she came with a pet. Most figures didn't, but since Shakoti was so tied to the darklings in the episode, these were little interdimensional squiddy monsters that she would call to attack people. Well, I am a big fan of Lovecraft and his stories. I've read almost everything he's written. And getting to do a like Cthulhu-esque little beastie character was absolutely high on my list. And when we could squeeze this little sort of buddy character in with Shakoti getting a tentacle one-eyed monster while we weren't making H.P. Lovecraft toys, this was pretty much the closest we were going to get. And you could definitely see the influence from the Lovecraftian designs for Shakoti's Darklings. Again, why the episode was so kind of dark and twisted, because it was very Lovecraftian. That's a word, right? Lovecraftian? Yeah, definitely a word. So yeah, one of the only figures that came with a pet outside of I think like Tila and Evelyn was Zor and Screech, respectively. Well, I guess Madame Raz came with Broom, but we actually had to count those as separate characters. Luckily, the Darkling was only counted as an accessory. Sometimes, if a character was articulated or could move on its own, management counted it as a separate SKU, like they did with Broom, who came with Madame Raz, and that kind of killed our SKU count. But luckily, we were able to get away with the Darkling as just being an accessory. And boy, I absolutely adored this. In fact, I have to say, I did wind up with quite a few of them because, hey, what can I say? When you're the brand manager of a line, you have access at samples. And this was definitely a figure I wanted multiple samples of because it meant I could get multiple Darklings. And yes, I understand the frustration that if you weren't the brand manager of the line, you had to buy multiple Shakotis to get this. And it's definitely fun to decorate your office with Darklings everywhere because they're just, fun. So, hey, fringe benefit of working your butt off to make a He-Man line is you get unlimited access to Darklings. But we can only afford to pack one in with Shakoti. We tried to do two, but it just pushed her over cost. Now, we knew again that we had to get to Lord Masque eventually because it's a natural pairing. Doing Shakoti without Lord Masque, since they went hand in hand in the episode. In fact, actually, Lord Masque was really the main villain in House of a Shakoti Part 1, and then Shakoti herself took over in Part 2. So, again, looking at characters that fans were making customs of, especially making figures that looked like they could be part of the vintage line, was a good indicator of how popular they were with fans and which direction we should go in. Especially, again, there were so many characters in Filmation, and zeroing in on like the 20 that we were going to be able to do was not an easy task, and we really wanted to maximize those. I'm really glad, though, that we did get to Lord Masque by the end. Actually, I think Super 7 did this one, or was this one of the... this was one of the last Mattel ones. That's right. This was 2015, I think, right after I left the line, but I was there to help set it up. So, yes, you could complete the Shakoti Lord Masque Darkling episode figure set, and we did try to include a Darkling with Lord Masque as well, but again, these things were expensive, because not only a lot of paint, but a lot of plastic. Most accessories are a sword or a laser pistol. Here you had a whole tentacle monster. What can I say? Tentacle monsters are more expensive. And it was great. She fit right in. I'm really glad we did her and got to her so quickly in the Filmation series because fans wanted her. And it was fantastic to have another female villain in the line, too. Because, female villains kick butt.